Hello and welcome to the latest CEO Coaching International webinar, Combating Quiet Quitting, How to Inspire Your Workforce to Bring Their A-Game. My name is Shep Moyle, and I am a partner at CEO Coaching International, and I am so excited for our discussion with a world-class panel of coaches, all of whom are former CEOs, who will help us discover how to foster company culture, empower our teams, and learn to work in this new world that connects and engages with our employees. We appreciate all of the questions you have already submitted. And if you have additional questions you would like to ask our panel during our discussion, please feel free to submit them in the chat. The topic of workplace engagement and the changing nature of work is at the top of every CEO's list today. Attracting, retaining, and engaging talent in our companies is perhaps our single greatest challenge today. But the nature of work appears to be changing as managers and leaders struggle in this post-pandemic world to understand the impact of remote and hybrid workforces, the changing perspectives on boundaries and time committed by workers to the enterprise, and the perspective of the team member about their work and the willingness to go the extra mile. The latest workplace trend under discussion is the idea of quiet quitting. Some say it's about doing the bare minimum during the workday. Others see it as a reprioritization of a healthy work-life balance. The most common description that I have seen is that quiet quitting is, quote, quitting the idea of going above and beyond, no longer subscribing to the hustle culture mentality that work has to be your life, that your work defines who you are, and that the job is to perform the responsibilities as outlined in the job description and then setting boundaries. As a former CEO, I know I was guilty of 4:30 a.m. emails or quick calls on the weekend to senior management on urgent items. And many of our managers and leaders of today are accustomed to a cultural expectation that everyone will go the extra mile for the company, even if it means extra hours or going beyond the specified job responsibilities. As New York Magazine put it, whether the subject is hustle culture or quiet quitting, the new TikTok phenomenon that launched 1,000 editorials, the subtext is always the same. Work is a problem, and we dream of ways to solve it. For a while, the trend was to grind harder or to cobble together a living doing side gigs. The pandemic shifted perspectives. Workers don't want to hustle, they want to reclaim their time. Just yesterday, the CEO of Alphabet, the parent of Google, articulated the quote unquote 20% more concept when he said that he believes the company needs to find 20% more efficiency in their operations and performance individually after years of aggressive hiring and growth. Other tech companies are requiring workers to come back into the office and to step up their game as potential layoffs loom. As companies demand more and potentially return to a model of command and control, how will team members react? What skills do the managers of today and tomorrow require? And is this a new and temporary phenomenon, or has it always been a part of our corporate culture under a different name? In order to address these questions and many others in motivating and engaging our workforces and building cultures, we have brought together a distinguished panel of former CEOs and CEO Coaching International coaches who have decades of experience in leadership and now have the perspective of frontline experiences all the way from small family businesses to multi-billion-dollar companies. Let's meet our panelists and have them introduce ourselves. Please welcome Mike Markey.
Hi, I'm Mike Markey. I'm a 6-time CEO president. I've run companies from 20 million in revenue to $2 billion across industries like building products, banking, chemical manufacturing, and two-step wholesale and retail distribution. Thanks for having me on board, Shep.
Terrific. Great to have you, Mike. Now meet Pascal Brochier.
Hey, good morning. Great to be here. Thank you for moderating, Shep. I have three pillars to my professional journey. First one was with Gillette around 4 continents, 5 countries, where I've experienced very different cultures and very different workplaces. Second one was in video games, where I spent 13 years building companies in a very more younger generation and a very rapid growth environment. And the last one has been in the startup world, where I've been working with founders, helping them scale. My passion really is to help companies scale.
Terrific. Thank you, Pascal, and we look forward to your perspectives. Now meet Erno de Bruin.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. Before becoming a coach, I was the president and COO of a international division of a family-owned manufacturing business. When I left, I led a workforce of 1,200 people in 16 different countries. So a lot of experience with what I like to call distributed work. Thank you.
Terrific, Erno. Thank you. And finally, Megan Watkins. Megan may have some technical difficulties, so we'll move right ahead. So today, our goal is to answer for our audience the questions that are on our mind and what we're thinking about in terms of the workforce engagement and moving forward in our lives. We'll be focusing on quiet quitting, why it is happening, how we recognize it, and most importantly, what are the specific actions we need to take as business leaders to improve employee engagement, culture, and motivation in today's world. So let's get the discussion started with the basic premise around quiet quitting. From your experiences, panel, are you seeing evidence of this phenomenon? Is this idea of quiet quitting real? And how does a manager identify it if it's an issue for their organization? What are the leading indicators that would show us that it could be occurring in our audience's organization, and what should they be looking for? Mike, what thoughts might you have on this?
So I think you've asked 3 questions. Do we see quiet quitting out there in the marketplace, sort of the leading indicators and what to look for? Yes, I believe it exists out there. I believe it's existed for years. It's just got a new name. I've been in the workforce for about 40 years, and I've seen it even when I started in sales. You're always going to have some members of your organization who do just the bare minimum. But I do believe with hybrid work environments and Zoom, it may be accelerating because people are not as connected to work. And then also culturally, it seems to be where boundaries are being drawn of, I don't want to be working 24/7. So I believe it exists. I believe it exists for a long time, and it's accelerating. To me, the leading indicators are, is the work getting done, and is it getting done in a timely fashion? Or are things slipping? Are your objectives and initiatives being achieved, or are they constantly being pushed or moved? And then, so that would to me be the real primary indicator. You can't look at when people are in the office or when they're on meetings, but I think you got to look at the output of it as, is it accelerating or not? And then that's what I would be looking for. So those would be my opinions, Shep.
Terrific. Pascal, what perspective might you have on those questions?
So the word quiet quitting, is it happening? It definitely is, whether you have noticed it or not. And it's a different term for engagement. And what we've seen is COVID has basically thrown us in a big world of change and transformation that has really put challenges to every leader, every manager, every employee on a different way to work. And how do you keep engagement? And some have done a good job at it, but most people had no idea how to deal with it. So yes, it is happening, and very often quietly, so not measured accurately.
And Erno, what's your perspective?
Yes, I agree with both previous speakers that it's not new. what happened, in my opinion, is that COVID exposed it, because before COVID, the environment of the office building, would always suggest that people are engaged. They come to work, they're there from 9 to 5, and that's it. And both from the employee's perspective and the employer's perspective, that gave some sense of normality. You're there, so things are happening. COVID exposed it, because the real question became, you no longer belong to an office building where you just go and show up, but the question became, do you belong to an organization that behaves like a tribe? Do you have a sense of belonging to a group of people that are going after the same goals together? And for the companies that don't really have a purpose, and that don't communicate their values properly, or don't have values, of course the employee doesn't belong. So what is he going to do? From the employer's perspective, his sense of normality disappears, because he's got no control. But for the same reason, if he has no tribe, if he's not a leader of a tribe, then how can he keep his people together if they not come to the same building? So for me, the lack of a proper culture with values and a purpose is the reason for this happening. And COVID just exposes it. Is it new? No, because I've seen many offices where half of the people, don't really work. And for me, I disagree a little bit with what Mike said about the output. For me, it's not the output; it's the extra. Are people really engaged? Are they driven to take a risk, to go above and beyond what they're expected to do? Because the people that do that are the people that will make your company grow faster.
All right. Well, and Megan, your perspective.
Good morning, everybody. Sorry about the little technical difficulties there. Can you hear me okay or no?
We can.
You can, yes?
Yes. So what's your perspective on quiet quitting?
Okay. Thanks, Shep. My perspective is that I think a lot of this has to come down to the expectations laid out from management to their team, and just the remembering that as leaders of an organization and CEOs and upper management, that the responsibility is really to inspire our teams. The employees themselves have to have the internal motivation to want to be able to be successful in their role and be able to put out the appropriate output of the expectations that have been laid out for them. But at the same time, there is the onus and the responsibility of the leadership to really be inspiring their team. And I believe that that's going to be one of the main areas of being able to really overcome and try to work around this kind of perpetually growing issue.
Interesting. Well, a lot of unique concepts brought up here. And Mike, I want to pivot back a little bit on what you mentioned in terms of measurement, in terms of how we understand as managers, right? In the old world, we kind of measured that by hours in the office, and if people were busy and active, then good things had to be happening. In this new remote world, we may not know whether the work is being done. So I think the question some of our audience might have is what tools should our audience be using? How do we measure output in a remote world, and how do we understand whether the work is actually being done? Any perspectives on those measurements and how we operate differently in a remote world?
Yeah, I think the way I would look at it, Shep, is that people need to know what's expected of them and what their output needs to be. That's key. But that output needs to be tied to a higher level piece, to the customer, to the financials. How does their work contribute to the overall success of the company? So really clearly defining that and agreeing upon that and getting them connected to it. One, I think, gives you a good way to sort of track, are you having quiet quitting happening or not? But it also connects the employee to the company and gives them a level of purpose. And that to me is one of the keys. People have to feel that there's purpose in what they do. Otherwise, if it's just, I'm going to call it, if it's just an 8 to 5 and I get no value and I get a paycheck out of it, Yeah, we're not going to have people that step up to be A players or top performers. They're just going to do it and then leave. And to me, that's not the employee you want. You want an employee that really cares, uh, sees purpose in it, sees value, is growing and learning, etc. So.
That's interesting, Mike. I was talking to an organization last week where they had implemented software in their system to where they could track the movement of the mouse cursor on their employees at home. And what then the employee had implemented was a piece of software that automatically moved their mouse even while they were away from their computer. Where does the team come down in terms of these types of technologies to monitor remote workers? And does that lend itself to this whole concept that Big Brother is watching and that the organization is asking too much of me? Pascal, what's your perspective?
So I think we have to rethink controls and rethink how you keep in touch. That has changed. So before you used to walk around the office and you could see people at their desk, whether they are working or not, but there was this sort of control element. You had the regular meetings. With remote workforces, you now need to have not so much control, but clarity on what the goals are, clarity on what more regular check-ins than what you had normally, because you don't have these walking around the office to touch base with people, have your open door policy. What does that mean in a remote workplace? And then you need to also acknowledge the greater flexibility, autonomy, and choice, because that's what comes with remote work. But at the same time, being very clear on the goals and very clear on what needs to be accomplished rather than just how, which is like sit from 9 to 5 at your desk. And you'll see that a lot of people are willing to engage on that basis. And there's a new level of trust that needs to be built. So this is a transformation for us as managers and leaders as well for the organization. It's different to manage a team that's remote from managing a team that's right with you in the office a few feet away. And so if you want to keep the same automatic controls you had before, it's not going to work. You just need to adapt and change.
And Megan, what's been your experience in watching how workforces and how managers are adapting? Are today's managers and leaders ready to manage in a remote world and the new challenges that we're seeing?
I think that's a great topic to bring up, Shep. Is that I think the training and development and the coaching that's needed of our management at this time is really imperative, because we are laying out expectations for our middle management to be motivating and inspiring their teams. However, they don't have the training and development that's required and has evolved from moving to a remote workplace. Things have changed a lot. The shift has changed a lot. People are available 24/7 now on their phones, and there's just been a lot of alterations in terms of what that day-to-day looks like. And I don't think that there has been enough implementation on the training and development to be able to help our managers to be able to effectively be able to work within in a changing environment.
Right. Erno, I saw you had your hand raised.
Yeah, I have some very strong thoughts on something that Pascal said about not being able to walk around the office anymore. I think if you have properly implemented tools to handle virtual work, and I don't like the word remote work or work from home. I like distributed work, because it remote or work from home sort of downgrades the activity. It's distributed work, in my opinion. If you have proper tools, and actually I shouldn't say if you have proper tools, if you use these tools properly, like Slack or Microsoft Teams, then you can, in my opinion, walk around the office. You can walk around on a properly laid down infrastructure on Slack or Teams and see what is happening, and you can sense who is contributing and who's not. It's not easy, and you have to learn how to do it, but you can clearly see who is doing stuff and who's just going after the KPIs. That's another thought I have. If you just have KPIs, I think a lot of smart people have figured out, while working in a distributed world, that they can meet their KPIs in 3 days rather than 5. And if you just look at the KPIs, these people can work 3 days a week, quietly quit, and you'll never know because they meet their KPIs. But you like I said before, you want those people to do more and more and more because they feel part of the organization, and they're motivated and inspired to do more.
So if we acknowledge that this phenomenon is occurring, it's something that probably has always occurred. It's now just happening in a different format, but we as managers now have different responsibilities. What does this portend for the future of the workplace? How are we going to balance these concepts of efficiency and cost and productivity for the organization that we have as CEOs and as leaders, but also now this what feels like a shift in power in terms of more to the team member and to the employees for setting boundaries, setting limits, and engaging our workforce. What's that future gonna look like? What do you think, Mike?
I'm going to come back to, and I don't think it's dramatically changed. I think just, let's say, with technology and remote workforce or hybrid workforce, the tools have changed, but we need to make sure that we create purpose for people in their jobs. That's absolutely important. We need to make sure that they have ownership for what they're working on, and that they see that ownership goes to a bigger picture. It's not just, I handle customer service calls and I've got to handle X calls, but what those calls do to the end purpose of creating a valued customer or a loyal customer, et cetera. And then we need to make sure that all those goals and objectives are aligned all the way through the organization. And I'll say the last one is we do need to work on some levels of accommodation. I think there is a little bit of a shift where people have other responsibilities. They might be caring for children, they might be caring for older parents. To me, as long as the work can get done in the time frame required, don't worry about, the mouse being moved every couple seconds. More of, is the work getting accomplished, and is it getting accomplished at a very high level of quality and performance? So that to me is it.
Okay, Pascal?
Yeah, so I'm actually quite excited about the ability that the technology has brought to empower a distributed workforce. And they are better communication tools, they are better engagement tools. We just need to adapt and change as we go forward. So as I said earlier, the levels of controls are not so much in what you see directly, but more in you as a leader inspiring an environment where people continue to grow, want to be there, and where the purpose and the culture that you are developing in your organization aligns with some of the values of your employees. That's the important part. If you can allow that to happen, you'll have a thriving environment, whether it's distributed, remote, hybrid, or in presence. And so the fundamentals are still going to be the same. They just execute in a different way going forward.
Terrific. Well, now one of our audience is asking if it is just a few people in the organization that are the issue, is it worth the time and effort to fight quiet quitting? When is the negative impact enough to merit a response? It is hard enough to get workers now in today's marketplace. Shouldn't I be grateful for the output I am getting? Who'd like to take that one? Megan?
I would say that I don't think it is coming from a small select percentage of most of the employees. A lot of the data is suggesting that this is 50 to 60% of the workforce. So while it may be that you may be only observing this in a select few of your team, or perhaps you're one of the lucky ones that does have a very engaged employee base, I do think that it is relevant enough that there should be attention put on it. And I think that communication and really encouraging the soft skills that have been highlighted and that we are looking for now in our employees is something that just needs to be embraced more. The more interaction that and communication that's taking place allows people to be able to talk about the challenges that are leading to the actions that they're not portraying. So understanding why are they why are they more disengaged? Why are they not putting in the output that they were at one point? And really asking those questions and encouraging that communication is going to make people feel a little bit more comfortable and have that level of trust that a lot of this is stemming from. So I do think it is more present than maybe is being observed.
Terrific. Arnaud, your perspective?
Yeah, I want to build on what Megan says. It's so therefore you shouldn't start with thinking about control and bringing people back to the office. Things are still the same as they were before, but now you really have to start with value and purpose. And values can no longer be something that are made up by a few people during a retreat and then printed on a poster. It really has to exist. It has to live within the organization. And based on those shared values, there's going to be a lot of trust between the people in the organization, and then people feel engaged and they will be inspired to follow their leadership. You cannot do it the other way around and say, oh, we need to have more control, and for control purposes, we'll have values and that will help us. No, it has to be sincere, because I specifically think younger people they see through that. They see through that, and yes, they do have. Many have another perspective on life, and I appreciate that. There's more to life than work. I think it's very helpful, and I think older people like myself realized, as what Mike said before, that you can do different things during your workday, like maybe exercising more, which is very helpful for both the employee and the employer, and still get your work done. So not sitting in the office all day long should be beneficial to the organization, I think.
So Arnaud, let me dig on that a little bit. As we talk about this concept of work-life balance, this idea of setting boundaries of I'm not going to do work past this time, or I'm not going to take emails on vacations, to what degree do we as CEO leaders have a responsibility to model that behavior? So most CEOs are hard charging. They say that's great for the line worker that they may not take emails, but I'm going to work 24/7. Family be damned, and I'm just going to do whatever it takes to drive the business. How important is it for the CEO and the leaders of the organization to model this behavior?
Mike wants to speak.
Okay, Mike, go ahead.
I want to come back just a little bit on the prior question and say, if we have people who are doing just the bare minimum in the business, just enough to get by and not get fired, to me, you need to deal with that right away. Even if it's harder to hire people, because that creates a mediocrity in the environment. And then, there's always going to be the couple people who always want to instigate, cause trouble. And there's a lot of people in the middle who sort of follow the herd. And so I think we need to deal with those. That's different to me than people who need work-life balance or want work-life balance and don't want to be taking emails on the weekend. So I just from my perspective, deal with your problems, problem children or problem employees. Don't wait because it's hard to hire, because that will pollute. Quality of work will erode. We create mediocrity. And I believe that risks the future of the company on innovation and future work. So I would say deal with that. How, as a hard-charging CEO, try not to be sending emails on the weekend. Look, I'm probably fall into that. I know I fall into that trait. I've learned now you can create your email and set a future send date. And I've tried to do that now. So instead of sending emails on the weekend, they'll show up Monday at 9 or 9:30. Or if I'm doing it at night, it'll show up the next morning during normal work hours. And I think you can adjust that and your team will appreciate it.
Okay, Pascal, and then Erno.
So to your two questions, first is it's amazing to see how many leaders have a hard time differentiating what's urgent from what's important. And I think when you look at your communication and what you're modeling for the rest of the organization, being very clear on what you focus on is very important. And what you'll see is that the workforce is used to 24/7 communication. So if something is really important and it's urgent, then all hands should be on deck to address it at any time, anywhere. But it doesn't have to be the way the company communication works all the time. And so I think you can model that as a leader. The second question is, I want to go back to the question from the audience on, I think I have a few quiet quitters. How do I address them? There's a difference also between those who actually speak up, who, if your culture is pretty open on communication and enabling people to share what's on their mind, the ones who are speaking up may not be your worst ones. The worst ones are probably those who are not contributing or trying to improve or resolve and are just super passive aggressive. And these are the ones who are not contributing, who are just sitting there waiting for the day to go by and not stepping up, that you need to address. And in all the conversations we have with our clients, nobody said, I wish I had fired that person late. Like nobody said, I fired that person too early. So the sooner, the better when you have really a rotten apple, you know, on your team.
Okay, Erno.
Yeah, to your question about the behavior of the CEO, I think there is no same answer for all situations. I think if you have a new financial analyst who just started, 25 years old, if you don't engage him in the weekend or after work hours, he may not be he may not be happy, because he's going to be motivated by speaking to the supervisor after hours, because he's hard charging himself and he wants to be part of an organization that is hard charging. If you have a person who's taking care of his parents that are not doing well, you have to be very much aware of that as a leader. You need empathy. And you need to tell that person, listen, I don't want you to work after 5 p.m. or in the weekend, or, you know, take a day off when you need it to take care of your parents or your new baby. You have to be aware of what's going on. I know there's a lot of articles being written now about too much, you know, social Zoom activity. We had a subsidiary in the Middle East, in Dubai, where there was a real lockdown. So people were actually locked up in their apartments 24 hours a day. Our general manager there, he had a lot of social activity on Zoom, including for the families, so for the spouses and the children. And it was the best thing he could ever have done, because people were going out of their mind, sitting in their apartment all day long. And instead of just having a town hall meeting like everybody else did, and going through the motions of you know, talking about the company and the culture, he actually engaged the families. And it was a brilliant thing he did, and it of course created a lot of good output afterwards.
Great ideas. Now, Megan, as someone who's built and grown a scaling business, what's your perspective on the job of a leader and a CEO as a role model in these behaviors?
Yeah, I think that given the timing right now, so it's the beginning of September. A lot of companies have their fiscal following the calendar year, and so we're kind of closing out this year and starting to do some budget planning for next year and thinking about things. I think it's a really good time to really lay out the expectations for every single role, because in working with different clients, it's apparent that what one person thinks is their expectation and what they need to be working on might not always be aligned exactly with what their leadership is looking for. And so I think taking the time right now to really start to fine tune that, and then taking the time to have an alignment session where you can really sit down and be able to communicate with your team and make sure you're in alignment on the expectations you've laid out for their given role, and then understanding the resources that they're going to need to be able to have to achieve that, so that we're planning on that, putting that in the budget to be able to appropriately hit that. Also gives the chance for that employee to have some pushback, to be able to say, this expectation within this time frame is something I can't agree to, and be able to have a little bit of that understanding versus just not doing it and then becoming disengaged and then becoming an unhappy employee. Because if 50% of the workforce is being put into this quiet quitting percentage, that is a lot of people that probably, it could be a bit circumstantial on where they're at. And so they're being put into this category, but it could be a little bit more circumstantial. And I think a lot of what Erno said is very relevant, is to recognize that how we manage one person isn't how we manage different people, because people do have different circumstances going in on a day-to-day basis. But I just think it's a really critical time as we're starting to get towards the end of the fiscal year, if you're on a calendar year for your fiscal, to really use this time to really think about and work with your executive leadership to really get clarity and alignment on exactly what you have for your team, and making sure that's being communicated. Those expectations just often are not in parallel, and so that's where a lot of this frustration comes. The team feels like they are not getting the recognition that they deserve, because they feel like they have been able to do what has been asked of them, and then the management is frustrated because they're not getting the output that they anticipated. But really, it just came down to a lack of alignment and communication.
Great. That is terrific insight, Megan. You guys are all hitting a chord with our audience, and we're getting a lot of questions coming in. So let's go to another one from the audience, which is, as a recent college graduate who is interning for a mid-sized company, I have found it very challenging to integrate myself into the company because of remote work. What steps would you recommend someone in my position that we should take so that they can continue growing as an individual and progressing in their career? Who'd like to take that first? What can the remote worker do to help engage in the company? Mike?
I'd probably say, are you completely remote, or do you have a hybrid? Because I think most people are.
Let's go completely hybrid.
Okay, completely hybrid or completely remote?
I'm sorry, completely remote.
Okay, no problem. Completely remote, I think you got to create touch base points. It's not just your one-on-ones, but reaching out to your coworkers, reaching out to your bosses, reaching out to your subordinates, not just on your regular check-ins, but periodically to stay connected. I used to do it when I first started, of walking around and talking to people, whether it was in the break room to get a cup of coffee, or I hadn't seen somebody in another building, so I would take the time and go and just walk in and see them. I think you can create that. You're just going to have to create it with technology, Zoom and Teams and phone, rather than in person.
So, Mike, I would imagine this recent college grad hears that and says, that's terrific, but how do I overcome the fear of reaching out to my manager or coworkers and saying, hey, let's do a coffee or do a Zoom, and potentially be either rejected or being seen as sucking up in some way?
Yeah, it's tough. Look, I think you just got to do it. What you're going to find is some of them really appreciate it and some don't. I had the same issue when I was in a mid-level. I would walk around and pop in, and I could tell some were just annoyed by it, and those people I just didn't go pop into anymore. Right. But a lot of them really appreciated it, to get connected and really to hear what's going on. So I think you just got to put yourself out there, try it, and then adjust.
Okay, Erno, and then Megan, and let's help out this recent college grad.
Yeah, and if everybody gets annoyed, then it's not your tribe. Then you don't belong there. So it's very simple. And I do think if you reach the right person, the supervisor or some leader, they have to accommodate what Mike describes. Because as I spoke about before, you can walk through the office virtually. You just have to accommodate it. So, for instance, when you have a Zoom meeting, it should be like any meeting. You need to let people in 10 minutes before, like they normally do, with a cup of coffee. And for 10 minutes, there's going to be small talk for the people that want to have small talk. Some people come 1 minute before, they just want to start a meeting, fine. But there should be 10 minutes for small talk. Same after the meeting. Some people stay in a room to talk about what happened in the meeting. You should do the same on Zoom. You shouldn't close the meeting at 10 and start another one at 11. It has to be accommodated by the leadership. That's very important. And I think every college graduate should realize that really good leaders all appreciate feedback from everybody, specifically from new people. And if they don't appreciate it, then move to the next company.
All right, Megan, then Pascal.
I was just going to say, with the level of freedom that leadership is, with the teams have with remote workplace, there does come a level of responsibility as well. And so I think it's important for this new employee to think about their responsibility, that they also have to voice their ability to want to make those connections. A lot of managers will say, you know, we hired you not for me to tell you what to do, but for you to be telling me what we need to be doing. And so if being able to make those connections is very important to that individual, then I think voicing those concerns is something that should be highly encouraged, and they should feel comfortable and know that their leadership does want to hear what their team has to say. I also think that leadership has a responsibility as well to be allocating resources and budgets to face-to-face events on a quarterly or biannual basis to really encourage that face-to-face connections. Because although we can certainly create relationships and bonds virtually, and we've learned to do so, the reality is that we all want to be able to break bread and be able to laugh and hang out with each other that we're working with on a regular basis, so that we can build real authentic and genuine connections. And so allocating resources to retreats, planning sessions, things like that, I think should be encouraged with leadership as well.
Great. Final. And Pascal, a final piece of advice for our college grad? Oh, you're muted.
I got to unmute, yeah. So I would go left field completely. I would say I would reach out to people in the organizations who I'm probably not used to seeing on Zoom calls and team calls and the rest, and say, why don't we take 15 minutes and we both go for a walk, talk on the phone, like do something really different from getting on another Zoom call. And then I would try to ask him, how can I help you with my job for you? How can I be of support to you? And help me understand what's important to you, help me understand your role. The same way you would do in the office, you just translate it virtually, and you might get rejected because people are in this Zoom fatigue, and that's okay. Just learn to deal with the rejection. You will, as you start building relationship with people who take your meetings and take your walks, and go for these 15-minute walks outside. Just get out of your room, go for that walk, both get on the phone, doesn't have to be on video, and it will yield great results. I've seen it happen.
Thank you. And one other idea I'll throw out to our audience is that in our company, we set up a shadow board of directors made up of young individuals in the company. And so when we were facing important decisions, because we were in the technology and e-commerce space, we wanted to get the insight of our newest team members. And so we made up actually a shadow board of directors and took many of our issues and questions to this board to engage them. And that really gave us a perspective that we would never have having it come up through the organization. Now, I want to pivot a little bit to some things we've touched on because, you know, pre-COVID, employee engagement was kind of boosted by this whole idea of after-hours activities. Let's have a beer, let's have social gatherings, let's have events. And increasingly, though, we're seeing that employees no longer place value on these activities, but see them as an intrusion on their time when they might rather be with their families and friends and coworkers, where they're saying, if I'm going to go have a beer, I want to do it with my friends, I want to do it with my family, I don't want to do it with my coworkers. What are you observing with your clients and in your experience, and how should companies be thinking about kind of this, you know, extra activity kind of thing that it may at once was seen as a benefit, but could potentially be seen as a burden? I know in our company, we had, you know, after hours beer bashes every week. We did random acts of kindness on the street. We did a lot of things that would engage people. Is this now a burden or is it a benefit? What are your thoughts? Megan, you want to go ahead? And then Mike, I'll call on you.
I think it's always going to increase the stickiness within a culture when you're able to, when you're doing things that are aside from just the productivity of growing the profits of the business. The more that you create those, that be able to interact in that way, I think is really important. I think it's a bit of maybe an excuse that people are stating that they just go to work and all they're doing is to go to work and not form those friendships. But I'm hard pressed to think that that's really the case. Humanity, we just naturally like to be connected to others, and so I think that while some might push back and have other obligations that mitigate them from being able to participate as much, there's definitely a core of individuals that create a lot of value there, and it definitely encourages longstanding employees to be able to support retention.
Okay, Mike?
I absolutely agree with Megan on that too. There is a desire, even if people's schedules are full, to get that interaction with their counterparts. So, the 25-year-old we were talking about, he or she's going to stay around a long time. One suggestion may be started at 4:30 if you're on 8 to 5, and then the people who have commitments will at least stay for a half hour or 40 minutes, but others may stay till 6:30, 7:30. So I think you can adjust it, but don't stop having it for the people who have commitments and can't make it, because I think you're going to find that the majority of the organization will want to be engaged, even if it's for a very short time.
Terrific. Now I'm going to put you all on the spot here. Erno, you want to go ahead? Another comment?
I agree, and I also wanted to add that it's important to make sure there's no peer pressure to participate. Some people have different desires. The person that Mike spoke about, whose office you enter, he doesn't want to talk to you. That's not a bad person. That's just how he's made up. That's likely also the person that doesn't want to go for a beer bash every week. It's not a bad person, but make sure that there's no mandatory rule that people have to attend, and make sure there's something for everybody, because maybe once a month you talk about or you have a cooking class, or you have a Slack channel where people can show how they can sing or dance. Make something outside of the regular work activity, social activity available for everybody, and then you will see that everybody at some point will participate. And of course, then at the end of the day, if somebody doesn't participate in anything, maybe he doesn't belong to the tribe. Fair enough.
Terrific. Well, I think we've got time for two more questions. The first, I'm going to put you on the spot, and the question is, what in this area of culture, employee engagement, combating quiet quitting, what's the one thing that you would recommend to our audience and their companies to start doing? And what would be the one thing you would recommend to stop doing? One thing to start doing and one thing to stop doing based on engagement, culture, and quiet quitting. Who'd like to start? Go ahead, Pascal. Thank you.
So I'll start by driving a super hard charge word, which is empathy. So start being more empathetic, start to try to understand the environment that's happening around that little window you see on your computer where that person is. What's their personal situation at home? How long have they been in that same window? And then this thing that they would stop doing is stop trying to control the same way you did before. You need to adjust and adapt.
Terrific. Erno, your thoughts?
Yeah. Too bad you had Pascal first, because I totally agree with him. I would just like to add, stop thinking that things will be the same as they were 2 or 3 years ago. You just have to forget about that. Things are different, and you have to adjust to that by doing what Pascal said. Start focusing on empathy and stop thinking about control.
Terrific. Megan?
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna back them up as well. I think communicating more, start communicating more with the team to understand their needs so that we can be empathetic and really understanding where that disengagement is stemming from, and showing that we care, and so we can address that, and they have a chance to let us address those issues versus just cutting bait and removing individuals from the organization, but really understanding their needs. And then trusting the team is really stop not trusting your team and making assumptions. And so owning those inclinations of really trusting your people. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you don't trust them, then they're not going to trust you. So that more of that trust, I think, is really vital.
Great advice. And Mike?
I agree with everybody. I'm going to be a little bit hard on a couple. I'd say just start dealing with your non-performers that are just getting by. They're going to pollute your organization and just make it worse. You'll be able to find somebody. And then stop micromanaging if you are. I mean, measuring mouse clicks or mouse movement to me is just crazy. But you know, you're trying to get some way to measure how output is. Get a greater, more higher level in something that ties to the customer or to the business, not how many times I click my mouse or move my mouse.
Well, that's great. And as we wrap up today, then I'd like to give everybody 30 seconds or less. What would be your final message, and what would you recommend to our audience today in your final thoughts? So, Mike, we'll start with you, and then go to Pascal, Arnaud, and then Megan.
Okay, I just have 5 things, and one that we didn't talk about, but make sure you're paying your people at market for the job they're doing. Don't underpay. Make sure that the work is meaningful to them. It's making sure they see the service to others and what they're contributing and how that helps both the customer and others in the organization. Create a culture of learning. Most people want to continue to grow and learn. And then create flexibility so that you can get the work done in the time required, but if people also can handle those life responsibilities that they have more and more.
Outstanding. Thank you. Pascal?
So I'll go back to basics, and basics is you'll be surprised when we talk to our CEOs how few have actually goals, clear goals, and specific measurable activities. And quiet quitting is just a distraction to making that happen. And if nobody ever got to places that were not defined, so the only way you want to make sure that people are going to get there is you actually define the goals. So that's number one. And then as a leader, the second point is that be vulnerable, be willing to learn and inspire. Your role as a leader is to inspire. It's not to control or micromanage.
Terrific. Arnaud?
Yeah, we heard a lot today about inspiring, about trust, values, purpose. I think the most important thing for a company that is growing fast is to realize how much more difficult that becomes when you no longer have 5 people around you all day long, or 10 people, or 20 people. Once you have 30, the last 10 are not going to be as close to the founder as the first 10. And that is a very difficult thing to overcome, because you need different systems and processes to communicate all those things to more employees. And of course, once you have 1,000 all over the world, it's even more complicated. But you have to change. You have to learn how to adjust your behavior so you can communicate your values to a larger group of people in a more formalized way than you're used to. That is something I see as an issue that is difficult for many people to realize.
Terrific. Thank you. And final thoughts, Megan?
My final thoughts are that I think we have to remember that people naturally go towards pleasure and away from pain. So recognizing those high performers is going to be that positive reinforcement so that people can see, wow, if I do overextend myself and I really do put myself out there and become a high performer, I will be recognized. And everybody likes the feeling of having that recognition. I think number 2 is focusing on critical projects and not just busy work. Nobody wants to be just kind of spinning their wheels and doing menial work. So really identifying those real critical projects that are really going to move the needle for the organization. And with that comes accountability. And the last part with accountability, it's obviously on the specific KPIs that are needed for that role, but it's also on the accountability of their job. And I think that moonlighting and doing other side hustles and jobs and things like that is also encouraging a lot of this quiet quitting as well, because people are busy doing other projects, but just making sure there is an accountability on the fact that they have a responsibility to this job and what those expectations are, not just for the critical tasks and projects that are due, but their overall responsibility and to the organization as a whole.
Outstanding. Well, that's all the time we have for today. I want to thank our outstanding panel, all of the terrific input we got from our audience. I know I gained great insight from your perspectives today, and I've got a long list of take-home value and specific things that I can go do, and that's what makes coaching so valuable. As always, for any CEO of a company in our audience with over 5 million in revenue, please contact us for a complimentary coaching session on our website at ceocoaching.com. I'm Shep Moyle. Thank you so much for joining us today, and good luck in making big happen in your organization. Good day.
Thanks, Shep.